Good afternoon and welcome to the January 2024 DIBBLE webinar on the state of relationship education today. I'm Kay Reed and I welcome you all here. This is exciting. It's the 11th year of our doing regular monthly webinars, and they said it couldn't be done. Anyway, pleased to have you all here. A little housekeeping. If you can't hear this presentation for whatever reason, do as we always do with technology problems. Log out, log back in, or call on your phone if that's easier. The webinar will be recorded and archived on our website. So if you want to share it with others or you want to review it, it will be there and we will let you know when it's available. You have a control panel in GoToWebinar, and the control panel includes a hand. So identify where your hand is because you're going to need it as we go through this conversation. And lastly, there is a questions box. And so obviously it's for questions, but it's also for answers. If I ask you a question, that's where you can put it. Please don't put it in the chat. And we have Kim Krauth, who's our engineer today, and she'll be fielding those questions and asking them of me at the conclusion. So again, really pleased to have you here. So, okay, let's find your hands. So please raise your hand if this is your very first DIBBLE webinar. Please raise your hand. Okay. Well, it looks like many of you are repeat people. We're pleased to have you here. Welcome back. And some of you are brand new and good to get to know you. Always fun to have you on board. So let's see. So just as a way of framing this conversation today, we're going to be talking about the state of youth relationship education today, the field, and its ancillary things that the field does. But I must tell you as a caveat that this is from the DIBBLE perspective, the DIBBLE Institute perspective. We are a national independent nonprofit, and we're firmly planted in the relationship education space. We translate research into teaching tools that are used all over the country. Last year, we conservatively estimate that we, meaning you and us, but mostly you, reached 127,000 young people with a relationship skills program. So we're very grateful to you. But it wouldn't be fair for me to say that I'm representing everyone who's publishing in this space. I don't know their programs. And so I don't want to misrepresent what we're doing here today. This is really through the DIBBLE lens, but I think it'll still be of interest and use on a more generic way as well. So the 4 topics for today are past, what was the history of youth relationship education, what are the trends and shifts in family formation and relationships and marriage over the last, I'll call it 40 years, what's going on now, and then getting out my crystal ball to talk about what I see as the future of youth relationship education. So those are the four parts of today. And the metaphor I'm going to use throughout this is the metaphor of a pebble being dropped into a pond and creating ripples. So stay tuned because we'll be referring back to this concept a lot during the program. So in the past, what's the main point here is that youth relationship education started as a way to address family formation in the future, that someday after these young people had taken relationship education classes as teenagers, when they were ready to set up their families, they would be more stable, safe, and nurturing, and therefore improve outcomes for their children. It was from my vantage point, that was like the sole focus of it. And, you know, we all thought that was great. So no harm, no foul, but it was a very unidimensional approach. And how we got there was, so the 80s, and I'll show you a chart in a little bit, after Governor Reagan, my governor in California, declared that there would be no more fault divorces, but only no fault divorces. There was a lot of divorce going on in the 80s. And what people were seeing and worried about was this growing divorce rate and its impact on children at the same time. And so there was an effort called the marriage movement to bring education, not just, like you shouldn't do that, but here's some skills that you can bring back a marriage that perhaps isn't working as well as you'd like, or to encourage better marriage formation. And there was also data that showed that children would suffer outcomes, not just in the immediate emotional sense, but over time, their ability to go to college or get a good job or, become violent or whatever was impacted by their parental form. So that started the marriage movement. The other thing that helped the marriage movement was there started to be a lot of research in the mid-80s, in the 80s, because researchers, those of you who weren't around in the mid-80s might not remember, but videos, they had a big camera. It cost tens of thousands of dollars. You had to set it up. It was really arduous to get videotape. And so in the mid-80s, they started making more compact cameras. They started having heart monitors, and they had other ways to gauge a person's physical response. And so you have this divorce problem as it was perceived, and you had tools to bring couples into a quote unquote love lab. John Gottman and his wife Julie at University of Washington, Scott Stanley and Howard Markman, University of Denver, David Olson, University of Minnesota, all established ways of looking at people, evaluating their processes, how to discuss tough topics, and came up with their own approaches to this marriage education movement. So that was all fomenting in the 80s. And so youth relationship education also got started in the 80s. It was when character education, Bill Bennett, Secretary of Education, was in charge, and they were all about American kids could become more productive and better and on if we focused on building characteristics like integrity and honesty and all those kind of things. So out of Boston University, I'll show you the, I guess it's backwards, but anyway, I'll show you the book. The Art of Loving Well was published by Boston University, and it's 41 selections of literature, really good youth literature, Tolstoy, Angelou, Updike, Shakespeare, all about relationships, family and friends, romance and marriage. And they did a random control trial with youth, 10,000 kids along the East Coast, Maine to South Carolina, who read the book, half who read the book, half who didn't, or they went through the book with an adult. And they had pretty astonishing results. And it was in the 8th grade year, they did it mostly in English classes, that the kids who took the program are only a third as likely to become sexually active as their peers who did not have the program. So instead of being at 28%, which was the control group, like the kids in Art of Loving Well was like 8%. And people thought, wow, this is astonishing. You can use this character ed approach. You can really focus on relationships. There is no biology, there's no sex, but it gives young people a chance to have mental batting practice. Really think through, this is not smarmy chicken soup for the soul, sorry, chicken soup for the soul fans, but things don't always turn out right. This is really literature. So it's quite an interesting book. By the way, it's out of print. There's a few left in the Dibble warehouse. Don't leave this webinar now, but at the end, go to our store and you can pick it up, because once they're gone, they're gone. And I'm really sad about that, because it was a great program. But that's where we got started. And about that time, Charlie Dibble, and those of you who've been on my programs, you probably can recite along with me Charlie's story, but this is to say, Charlie in the mid-80s started seeing his young friends, when their parents' marriages foundered, their outcomes, he started seeing them kind of fall off to fall off the track. And so he started thinking about how he could bring relationship skills broadly to young people around the country. He consulted with those same researchers, Howard Markman, Scott Stanley, David Olson, about their approaches. And they're the ones who, doing great work, and it can explain all their theories, but they just weren't equipped to go into reaching young people. for those of you who work with young people, you know it's hard, it's challenging, it's fun, but not easy. So fast forward, there's some people, I reviewed all the registration forms for people coming in, and some of you are policymakers. Well, in 1996, Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich signed a new welfare program called TANF, Temporary Aid to Needy Families. And it had 4 purposes, 2 of which are relevant to us. One discourages teen pregnancy. One is a goal is to discourage teen pregnancy, and the other is to encourage or promote marriage. And so we have a whole funding stream from the federal government, from TANF, based on this legislation. And the reason that the government did this is because at the time, it was thought that that marriage was a poverty prevention program, that if you could get more people to marry and pool their resources and come together as a family, you would decrease poverty, which is the goal of TANF. And we can, that would be a whole nother webinar to discuss how that went. But just so you know, that's where it started on a major basis with the federal government. About the same time, a woman named Diane Solie started the Coalition for Marriage, Family, and Couples Education, and she held the Smart Marriages Conference. And it was just by some fluke or act of God or providence or whatever that I found a Wall Street Journal's article where they were discussing how Diane Solie was going to hold this conference. And so I figured out, using old technology, like I dialed 911 and asked to find Diane. And so we participated in that for years and years while it was still active. And the interesting thing about Smart Marriages is it assumed this was not about therapy for marriages. This was about education and building skills. And Diane had the real gift of creating a huge tent for people to hang out under. So people of all political stripes across the political bandwidth, churched and unchurched people. I mean, there were all kinds of people who would come with the common goal of how can we strengthen marriage and families. And again, the Dibble Institute was on one end, really like, how can we start with the kids? So that was mid-80s and mid-90s. And through that time and up until today, the Dibble Institute partners with thought leaders to publish best practices materials that address this mission we have, which is empowering young people in their intimate lives. We've had a lot of success, and you can see some here and you're thinking, I've never seen that one before. And that's because we've made lots of attempts. And it's like, what do they say about Thomas Edison, that he had to make 999 light bulbs before he found one that worked? Well, kind of the same thing here. We've had lots of fun along the way, but that's what we do. We translate research from others. We are not the thought leaders. We translate research that other people have done or good ideas that other people have into teaching tools, and then make them available. So our first author, I just thought it'd be interesting for you to kind of get under the hood a little bit. Charlene Camper, here pictured with her 2 programs. Charlene was a psychology teacher at a high school in Southern California, a pretty, suburban, normal high school kind of experience. She wanted something to work with her AP psychology class. There's 2 weeks after they take the big AP exams, there's nothing to do. So she created a relationships and marriage unit for her class, and they loved it. So I was put in touch with Charlene, and we then worked with her to take, and I only say this with a great love and affection, things out of her shoebox and put them into a binder and make things, regularize things. And likewise, she wrote a second program, Connections, Dating, and Emotions. Both of them are out of print at this point, but both of them started to show the way to how, several things, how young people are attracted to this topic, B, how many young people need this topic, and C, the really good outcomes you can get. We started doing research. And Scott Gardner, if you're on this call, which I saw you registered, thank you, because you really helped make that happen. Then many of you know Marlene Pearson, our second major author. Marlene is still active today in updating. She just updated her programs last year and continues to be a great thought leader. And I'll just put in a blatant plug, because next month on our day, Valentine's Day, February 14th is the second Wednesday, Marlene is going to be actually talking about her experiences, or the experiences of young people that she works with relationships. So this talk I'm doing is not about how young people think about relationships. It's more about the broader picture, but Marlene will be here. So please wait until the end of this webinar and then go register. But Marlene's two really groundbreaking programs, Love Notes and Relationship Smarts Plus, are really the leaders of the field of relationship education today. I mean, I am a bit biased, but I think that would be a fair assessment. So, okay, here's another chance to use your hand. Everybody, go to your hand. And if you or your organization teaches a relationship education program, could be a DIBEL program, could be one that you made yourself, or could be one from somebody else, please raise your hand. I'd love to see how many in the audience are teaching relationship skills. Because there's some of you who aren't teaching relationship skills yet, and I want you to see that a lot of people are. It's not that hard. Okay, it looks like 37% of you. So that's, a goodly amount. So thank you for doing this good work. And if you're in the 70%, join the party, join the fun. All righty. So again, to wrap up, YRE started as a way to just address future family formation and outcomes for children. It was very unidimensional. Now we're gonna take a little sidelight over here into the trends, because it's obvious to everyone, I would think, that family life, relationship life, do kids still date, all those things, it's so different now than it was 30 or 40 years ago when all this started. So we'll start with some graphs. It's seldom that you see a graph that starts after the Civil War, which is really kind of interesting on this one. It goes up through 2010. I'm sorry, I don't have any more recent data. But you can see the top line is marriage, the bottom line is divorce. And it's interesting to note when there's major disruptions, either for good or bad, like the Depression or World War II ending, marriage rates dramatically shifted. And I can't help but think that the marriage rate declined in the 60s to the extent that everybody got married all at once, in 1946, when all the guys and gals came home from the war. But you can see over time that marriage has been declining and divorces have been, of course, declining because there's fewer marriages. Now, what this isn't saying is people are still partnering and people are still breaking up. We just can't track it. But this is obviously a trend. A second big trend or big policy that impacts it is marriage is open to everyone now. Everybody can come to the party, and that's great. We may have our own personal feelings about it, but the law of the land is everybody can get married. And so back in the day, we'd have discussions in the marriage world. What should we, shouldn't we? Is it good? Is it bad? Whatever. And it doesn't matter now. And especially in youth relationship education, it's hard to tell who's in the room. So we just don't assume the gender of your partner. You can come as you are. And so, but anyway, that's a big trend. Everybody can come to the party. We don't have those discussions anymore. Cohabitation has become normalized. So this starts in 68 and ends in 18. You can see the huge gap. 39% were married between 18 and 24 in the 60s, and hardly anybody was living together. And then today, as of 18, 9.4 are living together, and 7.3 are married. And the line that isn't on this chart that should be is those who are living solo or living with their parents, or because that would be obviously, there's a bunch of people who are unaccounted for here. And I think that's the other big takeaway, is that marriage, when people do get married, they're married later. They more often cohabitate. And we have a lot of webinars on cohabitation, and again, thinking has changed on cohabitation over the years. I'm not going to go into that, but we certainly have research has given us a more nuanced view of cohabitation. But the fact is, so there's no judgment in this slide. I'm just saying, fewer people are married, more people are living together. Again, no judgment here, but you can see that the line for the top line is two married parents with children. The next line is single mom, and you can see how they just kind of are getting closer and closer together, converging. Went from 85% of kids being raised by two parents down to 64%. And, that was through the divorce, when divorce became no fault, it was easier to split up, and then you become a single mom. So this isn't to say that there aren't amazing single moms doing amazing work every day, giving their kids every single advantage, and at the end having great results with their kids, but it's challenging. And I would direct you to a recent book from Melissa Kearney called The Two-Parent Privilege. And she kind of puts it in, she's an economist out of University of Maryland, and talks about not only the fact that there's more money if you have two parents living together, typically two earning streams and one rent and one insurance payment, all that, but you also have more time in your bank account. You have more family resources because you have two families. So it's not that there's a death knell for people who are raised by a single mom or single dad. Of course not, but it can be more challenging. But anyway, this is the trend. Yet, and here's kind of the kicker for me. This is and this is like the world's most boring graph, right? It's just all the same over the last 40 plus years. And the question that this Monitoring the Future asks high school students, a representative sample of high school seniors, is how important is having a good marriage and family life? And this is a graph of how many said it was extremely important. So 80-ish% of girls, 70-ish% of guys over time have said it's important to them. And so whatever we may think about the trending line in marriage, the increase in cohabitation, the increase in single parenthood, the decrease in parents raising their own two children, young people continue to be interested in marriage. Or at least, they say marriage. Maybe they're thinking long-term committed relationship. We don't know. But it says to me, like when people say, well, how do you know that the kids will be interested? It's like, well, what about your love life isn't interesting to you, right? So part of it is just the all about me, but also it's something that many of them want. Not everyone, for sure, but many of them want. So last year, I gave a presentation to the Healthy Marriage grantees about kind of where thinking had come around marriage in the marriage movement. And I was left with a deep sense of humility before the decisions people make about their family form. So back in the day, in the 80s, it wasn't just almost, it was like promoted that marriage was the one variable. If you only got married, then all these other things would fall into place. You'd be richer and healthier and live in a better neighborhood and have less crime, and your kids would go to college, and it was just marriage was the one variable. And certainly there is a lot of data to support things like that, right? Because when there's two parents, it is easier. Two parents in for the long haul for the kids. There are, in many cases, fewer challenges for sure. But it doesn't take into account things like systemic racism, or I would like to get married, but if I do, I lose my health insurance. And so what I've come to appreciate is a real sincere humility before people's decisions around marriage. And my hope is that we just give people enough information that they can really make a wise decision for themselves. And where the Dibble Institute has landed in this topic is we're really talking about the need to have safe, stable, and nurturing families. So however you get there, if it's a grandparent family, an intergenerational family, a step-parent family, single parents, whatever it is, safe, stable, and nurturing is the best place to raise children. Doesn't have as much to do with just an absolutism on the legal form of the relationship. But it doesn't, it can help sometimes. So here's my metaphor again. So the marriage movement, when we started in the 80s, put the initial rock in the pond. And then these trends are another rock in that pond. And you know how it happens when they go past each other, it kind of changes the initial pond ripples. So that's what happened here when we look at that. And there continue to be changes all the time we look at the demographics and they're always changing. So that is the one constant. So we see that marital family formation, marital cohabitation, societal norms have shifted over time and continue to shift. So now we're at the present. And the present tells us that what's so interesting about relationship education is that it impacts so many parts, can impact so many parts of a young person's life in positive ways. I was once at a conference and the speaker said, we have to pull in any one life, hundreds, if not thousands of levers to get a person, from childhood to a productive adulthood. And, that means like that the individual might be pulling some of those levers, their family might be pulling those levers, the school setting, society, et cetera, et cetera. And the interesting thing about relationship education is it can pull multiple levers simultaneously. So it feels like a very efficient and attractive and productive intervention. So sexual decision making. So why, originally when Dibble started publishing, we never had any sex in our programs, and people would say, why aren't you have to do sex education, reproductive health? And I was thinking, no, you don't. You can just talk about relationships, and however you want to talk about sex, please be my guest. But over time, I've seen the wisdom of including sexual, a little bit on the birds and the bees and sexual decision making, because there's many in some ways it just can't be repeated often enough. So in our programs, there's maybe 10% is on birds and the bees, and everything else is about relationships. Because when you think about, we talk about biology or reproductive health, we hardly ever talk to young people about the relationships that surround that that biology, that the sexual behavior. And yet, if you don't have a relationship around the sexual behavior, it's probably a prosecutable offense, right? And even no matter how fleeting, most people do have some kind of relationship. So we want to help them with that aspect of the relationship. So this is, if you asked any Dibbler what their favorite number was, I would, all you Dibblers who are listening, the answer is 46. Because we, the royal we, that would be University of Louisville, with the Dibble Institute cheering them on, did an evaluation of love notes with 1,500 young people in 3 groups: control, a health-based sex education program, and love notes. And at a year post-instruction, these were 14 to 19-year-old, primarily African Americans, highly at-risk populations, over 2 consecutive Saturdays, not a long instruction time. 46% less likely to cause a pregnancy or be pregnant in a year. So, if somebody said to me, do this thing and you'll be 46%, fill in the blank, thinner, your laundry will be whiter, your car will go faster, 46%. I mean, we would all like jump on that, right? So we're pretty happy with this 46% outcome. And then when I've asked the researchers, oh, I know, let me say one more thing about this, sorry. And what's interesting about this is that 2 things happened. All the young people seem to shift, right? So those young people who were already not having sex continued to not have sex, or more of them, they continued to not have sex, be abstinent. And those who were having sex, many of them also chose to become abstinent. And then on the other side, young people who were having sex chose to have fewer partners and to use more birth control and condoms. So the Dibble Institute lives in this tension between comprehensive sex ed and sexual risk avoidance. And we don't have a position ourselves, but because we just think whatever works on the ground to get kids relationship education. So regardless of where you stand on the sex, how to teach sex or how to teach to avoid pregnancy, relationship education can be a valuable component in what you're doing. And that's what we're finding is our clients span that spectrum, and we're really happy to be able to help. So when I went under the hood with some of the researchers, like, what's your hunch? What's going on? Well, one was, you help young people gain agency in their intimate relationships. You give them tools how to talk, how to communicate, how to get on the same page, how to make decisions, how to break up. You never talk to kids about how to break up. I also think reducing faulty relationship beliefs, like, oh my gosh, I'm in love, like, oh, maybe that's your head on dopamine, so helping them understand the physiology of attraction, And then actually building authentic connections with people, learning to build empathy skills and really communicate. These are all powerful things. So that when we say relationship, when Dibble says relationship education, we mean like this really robust, comprehensive approach to relationship education. And youth relationship education also has a strong impact on violence. And we want to thank the good folks at Auburn University, Doctors Francesca Adler-Bader and Jennifer Kerpelman, and their many minions who are listening now, who know who they are. Anyway, we're so pleased that they used, that they studied these relationship skills programs vis-a-vis violence. So in a study actually that Mathematica just published, 3 years post-instruction, so they did, I'm looking for my notes here, there we go. 3 years post-instruction, girls, so let me set this up a little bit. 9th graders in health classes, boys and girls, took Relationship Smarts Plus. They were evaluated or surveyed 3 years later, and the girls were less likely to be in an unhealthy relationship. There are also some sexual outcomes, but that's the one I want to focus on. And unhealthy was your partner kept you from seeing friends, partner made you feel stupid, or partner, you felt your partner might hurt you. So these are big, so the girls who took Relationship Smarts Plus were in healthier relationships that didn't have those things. So what happened to the boys, right? I mean, so the boys were in the class and there was no change. And one of my suppositions is that they were 14-year-olds. And when you're 14, what are you thinking about? You know, maybe not this, but good that the girls got it. And, you know, a big outcome. 3 years is a long time. Physical aggression decreased. This is from Auburn. And acceptance of aggression decreased. This is part of faulty relationship beliefs. Like, oh, they'll know I love them if I hit them, right? So that's bad. That's not good. So anyway, relationship education can tip the scales on violence. And where we're seeing this going, what's next for relationship education, I believe, is, you know, it's hard to be in a healthy relationship if you yourself are suffering from stress or trauma. You flare up, you don't know why, boom, you know. And so, so that's, instead of the traditional like communication, conflict resolution, how relationships grow and develop over time, la-di-da, we're seeing this becoming a new thing. And when you do that, and this is thanks to the University of Louisville, thank you, Dr. Ansel, significance in trauma coping skills improvement, PTSD symptoms declined, and better, but not significance, but happy trends in social competence and emotional regulation. Just a minute. Excuse me. Okay. So here's a question for you. Find your hands again and tell me if you're part of the 30% that's teaching relationship skills, do you see a benefit? Do you see your young people change in positive ways? And if you want to tell us how, you can put it into the questions box. But I'm really interested in, do you see your young people benefit from relationship education? And if so, how? And at the end of my little speech, which I think we'll have plenty of time, we'll go over those. Okay. Well, it looks like about 23% of people. So if we were at 30, you know, so 23, if it's 23 now and was 30, you know, that's like, you know, 70, 80% of people see that teaching young people to get smart above their love lives has benefits. So thank you. And please do fill out just shout out in your, in the chat box, in the question box. That'd be awesome. Okay, back to my metaphor. So, you know, we put in the 80s and the 90s, we put the rock in the water, started to go out, the whole tread sings, but changed the trajectory a little bit, but the ripple's still happening. And when we start to see outcomes that aren't this family formation in the far future, but today young people can benefit from relationship education, you know, that's more ripples in our pond, more little rocks are being thrown in. So we're super happy about that. So effective prevention tool for young people. Now this, I looked at it this morning, I found this image last night. This morning it looks like a crab, but last night It looked like a crystal ball. So my crystal ball is we see youth relationship education expanding to reach more youth in new settings with diverse funding streams because it can solve so many problems. So let's talk about that a little bit. So more diverse audiences. This young man, this young father, is in a pilot we did with child support services. So, he's there because he's not living with his child. The government asks you to pay for the maintenance of your child if you're not living with them. And we did a pilot with child support and found that we could get payments to increase by 26%. And my theory was, the theory according to Kay Reed, I should write a book, anyway, is that they were better communicating with the moms or the custodial parents, more empathetic. They're able to come to agreements. So they were getting along better with the custodial parent. So the custodial parent gave more access to the children. More access to the children made the dads more interested in paying their part. So this is certainly a diverse audience that I wouldn't have expected at the beginning of my career here. We see correctional settings as being really important for the expansion of youth relationship education. A lot of these young people have issues with emotional management, social competence, regulation, dysregulation. And so we actually were talking yesterday with our friends from Arizona Youth Partnership, who are working with young people, adjudicated young people who have a monthly or a weekly class that they need to take. They have to show up for a meeting, and so they're getting youth relationship education there. Again, my love life, I'm all over that, but you're also teaching them really important skills. Oh my gosh, kids in the child welfare system, residential care, group homes, youth in care, what holes they must have in their hearts. Probably not 100% of them, but many of them. And so I see this being more and more utilized in that setting, especially as the pregnancy rate is super high in this population, and they often don't have a lot of good role models. So I see us moving into that area. And in general, while I'm super happy to have these programs being taught in Sunday schools, family consumer science classes, and just regular kids should get this information, or I shouldn't regular, but young people who aren't system involved, but young people who have a lot of challenges in their life really need this education. It's not the only thing they need. Of course, they need healthcare and housing, education, skills training, all this. But if they don't have this part, you can make a wrong decision that sets you reeling. So these young people are with Youth Build. Youth Build, as you may know, works with young people who've dropped out of high school or been involved in the correctional system or come out of foster care. They are highly motivated to get their high school diploma, to take leadership classes, to get job training. And this is the kind of setting, this workforce development / leadership, that youth relationship education could really be useful in. Okay, the great, what did Johnny Carson used to say, the great whatever. I also predict that we'll see more diverse funding streams. As you see, that youth relationship education can solve a lot of problems that aren't directly related to sexual health or related to family formation, but other problems, that other funding streams will open up. Now, I notice some of you are brand new, and so for those of you who are thinking, okay, this is old news, just bear with me. This is for the newbies. The number one funder of these programs is the Department of Health and Human Services. And there's a variety of departments within HHS that fund these programs, but the primary place to get relationship education funded is HHS through Healthy Marriage and Relationships, Responsible Fatherhood, Teen Pregnancy Prevention, PrEP, Title V, and SRA. And if you want to know more about those, you're welcome to call me. I love talking about it all day long. We also have a sustainability webinar where we go into more detail on this. But I didn't want to leave this as, just want to put that out there, that this is really where most of the funding comes from. But that said, our buddies at the Department of Agriculture and Extension Services have funds for farm and ranch stress to work on that resiliency and toxic stress. They also have a child, youth, and family grants that they're using right now. Actually, they're competing them right now for use with high needs communities. So if you're in extension, you might want to chat with your specialist about those funds, who's applying. And if you're not with extension, you might want to go meet those people who live in the basement of your county courthouse, because they're great people, and they may have some contracts. You just never know. We talked all about the violence outcomes, and certainly we see that the Department of Justice, that there's more opportunities, and there will be more opportunities. Violence against women, Title II, which is juvenile justice prevention, stop school violence grants. I mean, I see a lot of grants that say, okay, we're going to stop school violence, we're going to have metal detectors, which is important, not unimportant for sure. But what if the entire school got a relationship ed program, or every ninth grader got a relationship ed program and learned how to solve problems without resorting to violence? I mean, help me out, people. Let's make it happen. And finally, and this is another big prediction. So this was new to me until recently, that every nonprofit hospital in America every 3 years has to do a community survey. And the purpose of the survey is to figure out how they're going to spend their own money in improving their community's health outcomes. And most of the money goes towards indigent care, as it should, but some money goes into other projects. So for instance, Dignity Health, which this is a project in Los Angeles, is using the YRE program related to resiliency, and an after-school program they use in a fairly low-income area. Arkansas Children's Hospital is doing a statewide project with family and consumer science teachers and teen pregnancy prevention. So let's see, right after you stop at the courthouse, go over to your hospital, if it's a nonprofit, and talk to them about their community benefit funds and see what the process is, because I think that could, it's a very interesting local solution. So the last thing is that I think it will be even more common to widely use youth relationship education as young people develop. That it won't be like, oh, that's an add-on, but like, of course, it's part of our curriculum. It's part of what our church does. It's part of what our after-school program does. So places where it could fit, the number one reason girls drop out of high school or don't complete high school is because they get pregnant. And often young people don't complete college because maybe they've had an assault, a sexual assault, or maybe they've gotten pregnant again, especially at a community college. And so, you could see, especially those programs that are moving young people, like first generation college students, they grab them as high school students, put them through programs, and then make sure they get into college. That would be a great place to use it. Workforce development. The only skills, the skills of like interviewing and dressing for success and making a resume are not the only soft skills you need to be competent and confident in a job. You need to learn how to get along, how to give and take, how to come to agreements. And what we know about relationship education is, even though we're teaching it in the context of your love life, those skills emanate out like my ripple, right? So we know that young people communicate better with their families, they communicate better with their peers, their friends, on the job, with their beloveds. And so, gosh, if somebody's listening here and can just get relationship ed into a welfare to work program as a regular part of the job club training, you'd be my hero. So I think that's what we'll start seeing. Oh, this is a big one. We talked about really focusing on safe, nurturing, and healthy families. And of course, children who are abused or neglected are in none of those. So what's interesting is when you teach young people to get smart about their love lives, and they make better choices, like maybe they don't rush into a relationship, maybe they stop and evaluate a relationship over time, maybe they think about how the relational life impacts their children, then they make different choices, especially when they have the child top of mind. And so we have started to see there is funding, federal funding that goes to the states for child abuse prevention. And while it's really important to say, let's have anger management classes for the kid, for the parents, let's do this, let's do that, but there's actually a prevention program here. And that is, can we help you get smarter about setting up your love life? And I think the answer is yes. And I think that's like super important. There's evidence that your relational quality, your romantic relational quality correlates, not causates, correlates to drug abuse, substance abuse, and HIV/AIDS prevention. It kind of makes sense on the HIV/AIDS because if sexual activity is diminished or you're using more protection, then that makes lots of sense. But I could also see the peer pressure associated with drugs and being smarter about the friends you make. So we're seeing a little, this is a nascent, where we could go in the future. And finally, just recently, we read a new study of relationship education where it showed that it actually built hope in young people. And that is so exciting. It's a mental health outcome, but it's just, don't we want people to live with hope? So we're super excited about that. And I think it has to do with when you have agency, when you can pull the levers, or I am not, my locus of control is internal. I'm not subject to the whims of the world. Then you can take charge, and that can be inspiring. That can be hopeful. So we're super happy about that. Okay, so no hands this time, but go over to your question box and write in, what arenas do you see youth relationship education moving into? Do you see some new areas so here's my dream. Every day I get up and think, how can more kids get smart about their love lives? How can we help them with their relational lives? So help me out. If you have some ideas, write them in the question box. And by the way, just as I'm saying this out loud, I just want to say not every young person is going to have a love life, and it's okay if they don't. Most do, because it's developmentally what young people do, but not all the young people have to. So they can just be happy, they can, whatever they're happy with, their friends or whatever. We all could use help with our relationships, no matter what kind they are. So there you go. Okay. So back to my puddle or pond, as I say. So we not only see that the research shows that there's all these good outcomes, but there's indications that there's more and more places that we can teach relationship education. So super, super excited about that. And it's not, again, Dibble is not the direct service provider. When I say we teach, I'm really saying you teach. Thank you very much. Not us. We support you all the way. We're your biggest fans. But we do see, in the future, it becoming broader and broader and just normalized. So I wanted to end with a story, my favorite story of relationship education. And those of you who've heard it, you're just going to have to hear it again. But a young mom who was involved, I think she was recruited from a food stamp program. So she was on government benefits. She was probably on TANF, she was single, had a child, took a youth relationship education class. And she reports back to her teacher. She said, I was at the bus stop the other day. This was in Sacramento, California. I was at the bus stop the other day, and a guy drove by slowly and said, "Hey, baby, what's your phone?" And she said, "Before I took this class, I would have gotten in the car with him." There's not a time I don't say this, that I say this, that people's eyebrows don't just shoot up. Yeah, I would have gotten in the car with him. But now I understand that he didn't know my name and he didn't know anything about me. And I said, "Move along, scram." Oh my gosh. I mean, I still get tingles when I've been telling the story for those of you who know me, decades now, probably. And what I think is important about this, as illustrates the power of relationship education, are multiple things. One, I used to think, and I still do, I think it's important to learn communication skills and how to empathize and how to fight fair and, all that. But she learned, we helped her with some faulty relationship beliefs. And her faulty relationship belief was, somebody calls my name, or doesn't even call my name, just calls me, I'm supposed to go. That's my job. And so we gave her agency in that relationship, or the non-relationship as it was. And so I don't dismiss the power of changing faulty relationship beliefs. Kathy Eden has a great book. I think Kathy is now in, she was at Harvard, and she was at I think she's still at Johns Hopkins, wrote a book called Promises I Can Keep and Doing the Best I Can, about family lives of single young parents in Philadelphia. And she talked a lot about how they just have encounters, that it's not even a relationship. It's like, hey, baby, and then, lie down. So to me, helping these young people understand how relationships work and faulty relationship beliefs is huge. So that's number one. Number two, how far upstream she made that choice. So, we all know young people and all of us need to understand the red flags of an unhealthy relationship. We should also understand how to negotiate our own sexual boundaries, whatever they are. But she didn't have to invoke either of those skills. She just said, no, my basic standard is now I have a new standard. You need to know my name. That's awesome. And lastly, how many bad things were prevented by her action to her, to her baby, to him, right? We don't know. Maybe she was fatal attraction. But you think of all the things that government works at and we all care about, child abuse and neglect, child welfare, kids in the judicial system, or kids in child welfare system, child support. I mean, all these things were just prevented. And you can't prove a negative, you can't say, well, look, I guess we could say, well, imagine if she'd had a second baby and all these other bad things happened, what would that have cost us financially? What would that have cost society? But it's a pretty profound story about the power of this as an intervention that I hope continually gets to be more normalized. Okay, so now it's your turn to help us keep these ripples going. Every morning when I get up and say, how do I get more kids into relationship education? I hope you say that same thing to yourself. I know you have another job, so I get it. But just in case, I just think it's an imaginative process for us to really think about what are the systems that we can interject relationship education in that will really benefit young people. So, okay, I'll get off my soapbox. Thank you. Questions? So Kim, do you want to hop on or, open your mic and tell me if there's any questions here?
Yes, hello everyone. A lot of the questions that have come through so far are just in accordance with the things that you have asked about how people are using their youth education programs and the benefits that they see from that. And then also in what arenas do we see youth education moving to. We did have one question that asked if there's an adult version of Love Notes. Maybe you could address that one.
Yeah, that's a great question. So Love Notes, so the short answer is yes, indeed there's two, maybe more. But Marlene Pearson used the work of Scott Stanley and Howard Markman at University of Denver, and their adult program is called PrEP. And I think if you go to prepinc.com, you'll get to their website. And they have a program that Marlene wrote called Within My Reach, I think she wrote, which is for single individuals, a little older than the Love Notes population. And then PrEP wrote Within Our Reach, which is for couples of that age. So you can go to PrEP. They're completely separate from us and have different training requirements and all. But it's a great program. Marlene did it. I must say, Love Notes, when we did that child support project, we had 55-year-old dads in it, and they loved it. And it was actually quite interesting because they would give the younger men a lot of mentoring and guidance. But we haven't. So you might, if you want to talk to me, Shana, about what you're looking at, because Love Notes is pretty flexible if that's what you need.
We had another question come over. Many of the children we serve struggle with their parents' unstable cohabitating relationships. Do you have any hope for research emerging in this area?
Oh, there's a lot of research in that area. There's a ton. We'll have to look it up and get it for you. But if the research is what does instability do to children? Andrew Cherlin, Cherlin, I can't remember the name of the book, but there's a lot of research on instability in children. And there's we also have some webinars, I think in the last couple of years on churning, relationship churning. It's bad for kids. It's bad for kids. Unless they're buffered, like they have a grandparent they can hang out with. But if you have multiple partners coming in and out, and you might, just saying, sometimes there's an opportunity if you're working with children to do a program for their parents. And so some places like will teach one YRE program for kids and then something else for their adult parents, or teaching part of it to help it. But if you have want to get in touch with me, I'll show you my email at the end, and I can give you more resources on that. But that's fairly well documented. Aviva Friedman asks, and Kim, I'm not taking yours, you can keep looking. Maybe the digital sphere, like, oh, I see. That's not a question about online education. We do have tools if people want to teach relationship education online during the pandemic. Our amazing clients came together and came up with a online teaching toolkit, which if you ask us, we've kind of hidden it away thinking that the pandemic's over. But if you'd like it, we can certainly get it.
There is a question about, is there a grant to teach Love Notes curriculum that we can apply for? The Project Rise grant that we were a part of is now closed, so we are no longer have funding support to teach Love Notes for 2024. Do you want to go into some possible grant opportunities that might be coming down the pipe?
So thank you. Yeah. So first of all, sign up for the Dibble newsletter, and then secondly, read it. Just saying, it comes out once a month. It comes out the first week of the month, and there's always grant opportunities in it. This coming year, the federal grants are sexual risk avoidance. I mean, there'll be some, and it's not a big grant year, but there will be some. Title V, sexual risk avoidance, and some PrEP funding. Esther, it'd be interesting to know what state you're in. I would think my idea of going to your local hospital and seeing what they do with their community benefit funds could be, not that they're going to be able to like immediately write you a check, but you might get on their radar screen. And we also can do, I think it's I don't know, $99. We can do, we have researchers who can look at your situation and do a sustainability report for you, looking at the various options in your state. Because some states have their own teen pregnancy prevention funds. Some states have their own, it's just, yeah. So Esther, if you want to write me, I have a worksheet. Maybe I'll just send it along with this webinar where you can start looking and researching options there in your neck of the woods. Oh, Esther, you're in Los Angeles. We should talk. Yeah, call me. Okay. Well, this has been super fun. So no more questions. This is a last chance to say.
Is there evidence that teaching Love Notes to youth helps improve the adult-parent relationships?
So two things. So we had early evidence from the programs that Charlene Camper did, and the content is pretty similar, so like the theory of change is pretty similar, that when you taught young people one of Char's programs, their communications with their parents improved. And so I think when you teach young people communication skills, they're communicating better with everyone. And Love Notes has the added advantage of the trusted adult connection, where you can, you have the kids reach out to their parent or guardian or someone they, in their lives that they like, they trust and feel comfortable with, to build those connections. So I would say that yes, I mean, I would have to go back into the research to see if they actually asked that in a Love Notes research project, but I think that I would say the answer would be yes if you're just asking Kay Reed. Just saying. Okay, so you guys have been awesome. I'm gonna look at each and every one of your answers for here, so that will give me some good ideas. So thank you for joining us today. Please complete the survey. We do read it, and then we will send you, the archive will be up. It'll be on our webinar page under free resources. And then here's my email. Those of you who want to talk to me, I love doing that. So call me, email me, we'll talk. And if you have more technical questions, you can write into the regular email. And then next month, as promised, Marlene Pearson and I, it's going to be a new kind of webinar. We're just going to yak for an hour and not even have slides. But what's interesting about Marlene is she still teaches at a community college. She sees a lot of 18 to 20-year-olds. She also works directly with the community, with these opportunity youth. And people always ask me, what are kids thinking about relationships? And I think, I don't know. I don't see kids. But Marlene knows. So let's see, on your to-do list is go buy a copy of The Art of Loving Well, sign up for the webinar, and make sure you read our newsletter. Just saying. Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate you and all your good work. And we'll look forward to seeing you next month. Take care.